In the last session, we completed the EBS topic. And in this session, let us start a service called Simple Storage Service. And this Simple Storage Service also a storage option, but it is completely different from the EBS, what we covered. EBS is also a storage, right? The same way, S3 or a simple storage service. We call it as simple storage service. In short, we call it as a S3. What exactly the difference between the EBS and S3 is? EBS is a block-based storage, right? Whereas the S3 is object-based storage. And we can say all these services are AWS managed services, means to make that storage up and running or to make that storage accessible, that is not our responsibility. Amazon will take care. That's why whenever we talk about these AWS services, we call them as AWS managed services. We call them as AWS managed services. So here S3 is AWS managed, highly available, highly reliable, highly reliable, and highly secure object-based storage. So what is this highly available, highly reliable, and highly secure? Highly available means 24 by 7, like with a high availability, the data is accessible. Highly reliable in the sense, whenever something went wrong in the Amazon's data center, something got corrupted, in that case also, maximum of your data will be recovered. Reliable, or we can say redundant. Reliability, redundancy, all the terms are same. So here AWS S3 offers 99.99% of availability and 99.123456789. Total you can see 11 nines. 99.99% of reliability, or we can say a durability. Durability or reliability, whatever it is, both are same. S3 is committed to provide 99.99% of availability and a 99.99% 99s of durability. What exactly this means? Means if the Amazon's data center got crashed, you can recover almost all the data, and we can say one file might gets lost out of trillions of files. To make that easy for you to understand, let me show you 99.123456789% S3 durability, right? Okay, what does that mean is, see here, 11 nines is a guarantee of exceptional data preservation. Means if average loss, like how much data we can lose, if we ask that average loss of a single object out of what is this, 10 billion objects, means if you store 10 billion files for 10,000 years, if you keep if you store 10 billion files, object is nothing but a file. If you store 10 billion objects for 10,000 years, then there is a chance of losing just a single file. That is what 99.99s of durability, and that is also called as 11 nines of durability. Means if you count all these, you can see 11 nines. If you store 10 billions objects, if you see in the Indian things, hundreds, thousands, lakhs, right? 1,000 crore objects. If you store 1,000, is it 1,000 or 10,000? Wait, up to here lakhs. Yeah, 1,000 crores of objects stored for 10,000 years, then you might lose just one object. All the remaining objects, you will never lose it. That's what 11 nines of durability. That's how Amazon will provide that durability. Like if you ask me to explain the durability, there is a chance of losing one object out of billion objects stored for 10,000 years. If you store 10 billion objects for 10,000 years, then you might lose only just one object. Object is nothing but a file. It can be audio file, video file, image file, text file, PDF, that doesn't matter. That is what the durability. Now, what exactly this object means? Object is nothing but a file like a PDF, image, audio, video, PDF, document, etc. Any object is going to be the, like any file is going to be the object. So this S3, what exactly the difference between the object based and block based is? Object based storage can be used to store the objects only, cannot be used to install operating system or a softwares. What does that mean? You cannot use, you cannot install any softwares on S3. You cannot install operating system on S3 storage. S3 cannot be used as a storage drive for the EC2 instances. So for better understanding, I can say we can compare the S3 storage with Google Drive, OneDrive, what else? Dropbox. What is the purpose of these Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox? You can store some objects. You can store them as a private, or you can store them as a public, or you can store and share those objects or those files with very few people also, right? The same way the S3 works, but we will get a lot of features also. We will get a lot of features on the S3. And this S3 storage is referred as a bucket. What does that mean? Bucket is the container in which all the objects are stored. Like if you want to like store some files, what we will do, we will create some folders, right? Directories we call, like audio, video, and so on, and then we will store all the objects into the folders. The same way here, or in for the EBS, we call that EBS storage as a volume, right? Volume. In the volume, we can store all the data. So here, bucket is the term we use in the S3, whereas the bucket is a container in which all your objects are getting stored. All the objects are getting stored. And for every bucket, we need to assign a name, and we must follow naming convention. And we have to follow the naming rules. There are some rules while we create the bucket and while we are assigning the name to the bucket. And also, or before that only, let me write down few other points. S3 supports unlimited storage space, means whenever you are storing the data, automatically it will grow and it can accommodate unlimited storage. S3 supports unlimited storage space, and we will be charged based on the actual usage. Means if I create a bucket and if I upload 1 GB data, and if I keep that 1 GB data for 1 month, then I will be charged for 1 GB data for 1 month. If I upload 10 GB, then I will be charged for the 10 GB only. And there is no option or no point of assigning some storage space at the time of creating the bucket. Whereas for EBS volume, we have to define how much space we need for the EBS volume. Whereas for S3, it supports unlimited storage. But there is a limit, that there is a condition that each object must not exceed 5 terabytes size. Means if I upload a file, that file must be less than or equal to 5 TB size. But you can upload thousands of 5 terabyte files individually. But each file, single file size should not exceed 5 terabyte size. Let us say if you have 1,000 files, each file is 1 terabyte. You can upload all 1,000 files because each object is less than 5 TB and you can store unlimited space. That's how S3 works. S3 is just a storage space for object storage. It is an object-based storage. Now, what we do is we must know what are the naming rules, right? What are the naming rules? Let me list out the naming rules first here, or we will do one thing. Create S3 bucket in Northern Virginia region. Let me name it as my first S3 bucket and 24 September 2025. This is going to be the name of my S3 bucket, and observe the naming rules. At the time of creating the bucket, we will observe the naming rules. There are multiple rules we must follow. Like example, you can't use capital letters in the name of the S3 bucket. If I use capital letters, it doesn't allow you. If the bucket name is less than 3 characters like AB, that doesn't support. Or if the bucket name is more than 63 characters, it doesn't allow. If you use special characters other than dot and a dash, it doesn't allow. And if the bucket name starts with a dot, it doesn't accept. Okay, let me do one thing. Bucket name must be between 3 and 63 characters. Let me write down all the rules, then we will verify. Okay, and bucket name must not contain uppercase letters. Bucket name can contain lowercase letters, numbers, period. Period means dot, and dash. Dash means hyphen. Let me list out that also. Period means dot. Dash is nothing but this one. This is the dash. But bucket name must start and end with either lowercase letter or number. What does that mean? The bucket name should not start with a dot or dash. It can start with lowercase, it can start with a number, and also it can end with lowercase letter or a number. Bucket name doesn't support consecutive periods, means dot dot. It is not valid, but you can use my dot s3 dot bucket. That is valid, but my dot dot s3 dot bucket is not valid. Okay, it is not valid. Okay, let us verify all these at the time of creation, and then we will note down if there is any other. Okay, there is one more important thing. Bucket name should not looks like an IP address. How an IP address looks like? Do you know like how an IP address looks like? Any idea? Anybody knows how an IP address looks like? The format of an IP address. Okay, it looks like 192.168.2.1, just for an example. So it should not like 4 numbers separated with dots, because that is a structure of an IP address. The bucket name must not looks like We call it as must not represent an IP address. Okay. At the time of creating the S3 bucket, we will verify all these. Okay. Right. Let us go ahead and let us create our S3 bucket. Okay, the most important thing, I think I should mention at starting. Bucket name must be unique across the globe. That is the most important thing. Like means if you have created one bucket name in your AWS account, nobody else can use the same name for their buckets. I can say across all the regions and accounts. It must be unique. Let us verify. Okay. So first let us create the S3 bucket. I guess you might understand why I'm using this kind of name. There are high chances that this name going to be unique. If I use my first bucket, there is a high chances that that name might be already taken by someone else. We'll verify that also. How to create the bucket? First, log into your AWS account. In the search, type S3, scalable storage in the cloud. And what is our requirement? In which region we are planning to create? Northern Virginia. So make sure that you are in the Northern Virginia region here, right? Yes. I have a lot of buckets. Ignore. No need to worry. Okay. So here, let me click on create bucket. This is the one. Create bucket. Generally, in your S3, but whenever you log into your AWS account, you don't see anything here. It should be like empty. It should be empty because you never created any S3 buckets. So now here, let me click on create bucket. Actually, there are two types of S3 buckets available. Not two types. Recently, they introduced multiple also. We are only talking about general purpose buckets. Going forward, we will talk about directory buckets. We will talk about table buckets. We will talk about vector buckets and all the things. Okay. But for certification point of view or for the real-time purpose, general purpose buckets are most important. And for certification point of view, you need to know about directory bucket also. Table buckets and vector buckets were recently introduced. We will see the overview of those, like what is the use case, when to use these two types and all the things. First, let us go with general purpose buckets. Okay, make sure that you clicked on general purpose buckets. Click on create bucket. And here it is asking you what type of bucket you would like to create. The first one is general purpose and the second one is a directory. What is the use case? Let us see. General purpose buckets are recommended for most use cases and access patterns. Whenever there is no specific requirement, always it is recommended to use general purpose bucket. Why? Why? Because whatever the object you store in the general purpose bucket, that object will be stored across multiple availability zones. Means a copy of your file will be replicated or stored in the backend across multiple availability zones. Means if one availability zone got crashed, by any chance, if your object is stored in that availability zone, you will lose the data, right? But here, they will replicate your data or they will maintain the copy of your data across multiple availability zones. I guess they will store across 3 availability zones, minimum 3 availability zones. But there are some exceptions. I will explain those exceptions also. But whenever someone asks you about how Amazon will maintain your data redundancy, you have to say Amazon S3 will maintain the objects across multiple availability zones. What is the use? Whenever one availability zone fails, your data will be recovered from the other availability zones. And directory bucket, it has a different unique case. They only what we call that the data will be stored in a single availability zone. Less redundancy, but your data will not corrupted or you will never lose your data. But the use case is they will provide the faster processing of data. There is something called S3 Express One Zone Storage class that we can. So we have to cover this after general purpose S3 buckets. To understand the directory buckets and all, We must know what are the different storage classes available and all. Then only you can understand the directory bucket. Okay, first let me choose general purpose. Bucket name. What I do is I will say my first bucket, and I will scroll down and click on create bucket. What happened? What is the error? Bucket with the same name already exists, but not in my AWS account. See here, there is no S3 bucket with my first bucket, right? There is no S3 bucket in my account with the name my first bucket, but they will verify across all the AWS accounts across all the regions. Okay, now I will try to create a bucket with a two characters name AB. Let me click on create bucket. What is the error? Bucket name must be between 3 and 63 characters long. So you can't use AB. Okay, now I will open the notepad. What is the next one? Bucket name must not contain uppercase, right? Okay. So now what I do is I will say capital M. Bucket name must not contain uppercase characters. We verified this. Now bucket name can contain lowercase letters, numbers, periods, and dash. This will verify at the end. Bucket name must start and end with either lowercase letter or number. So what I do is I will end with a dot. What is the error? Bucket name must not end with a dash or period. Period is a dot. You can see here. Period is a dot, dash, or hyphen. We call it as a hyphen. It should not start with end with a dot. Let me end with hyphen. No. Let me start the bucket name with hyphen. See here, or a dot. No. Then what else? Consecutive. Okay. Now let me use my first S3 dot bucket. See here, no error. Let me use another dot, no error. Let me use a dash, no error. But whenever you use bucket name must not contain two adjacent periods. So here what happened? I'm using two dots, which doesn't allow, which S3 doesn't allow us to use such kind of a things. And the next one is 192. Okay, let us go with this. 192.168.2.1. What happened? Bucket name must not resemble an IP address. It should not looks like an IP address. So now I will go with the valid name, right? So here we have a lot of options, right? We have a lot of options. Ignore all the options, but one thing remember, object ownership ACLs disabled. I will explain that what it is, what is ACLs and all. But for now, keep every option as a default option because we are still at the initial stages of S3 service, right? Keep everything as a default option, but observe what all options were selected by default and all. ACLs disabled by default and block all public access is enabled by default. What does that mean? No object will be a public object. What is the meaning of a public? Public means anybody can access the object, which is getting blocked by default. Click on create bucket and the bucket got created. Bucket got created. Let us wait. It is still getting created. Where is our bucket? Here it is. Right? Okay. Now here, let us write down a point. By default, S3 bucket will be created with ACLs disabled and block all public access enabled. Means no object in that S3 bucket can be publicly accessible. Means that object is private object by default. And even being an administrator, you cannot make that object as a public object. We'll verify that also. Now what I do is upload an object into S3 bucket using all default options. And what I do is I will create a file, file1.txt. Any object you can upload. If you have an image, upload it. PDF, upload it. That doesn't matter. Okay, any object. But I recommend you to upload an object which can be opened using a browser. If you upload a Word document, you can't open in the browser, right? First, you have to download it and then only you have to open. Upload any object, that doesn't matter. Let us see how to upload. How to upload? First, go to your Amazon S3 service, click on general purpose buckets, and here click on your bucket name into which you would like to upload the objects. Then here there are different tabs available. Going forward, we can see what is the properties, what is permissions, what is management and all. For now, just go in the objects tab. How many objects are available in these buckets? No object. So here you can see an option called upload. Click on upload. Add file. Add file. Let me choose some object. Okay, let me choose an image. Okay, image.jpg, and I will click on upload. I clicked on upload, means that image, the object which is image.jpg got uploaded. Whenever you see upload succeeded, it got uploaded. Now click on close, and you can see there is one object uploaded. Type of the object is a JPG, and size of the object is 2.9 MB in size. And the storage class is a standard storage class. We have a different storage class available. Standard IA, one zone IA, intelligent tier, glacier deep archive, glacier instant retrieval. We have multiple things. We will spend one session to understand all the storage classes. But for now, by default, all the objects will be uploaded into standard storage class. Now, here, this is the object, right? Click on the object. Click on the object, and you can see the properties of the object. Who is the owner? In which region it is? When it was last modified? Size. Key means name of the object. Now here, you can see something called object URL, right? Note down the object URL. Let me note down the object URL. This is the object URL. What is the object URL? Object URL can be used to access the object. Means that is the path to access the object. But what I said, by default, whenever you upload an object, that object will become a private object. By default, all the objects are private objects. Private object means anonymous access is not possible. Now what we do, verify that the uploaded object is a private object. How? Use the object URL by accessing the object URL in the browser. Okay, right. So here, let me open the browser. Let me open a new tab. Enter. We should get an error. What is the error? Access denied. And even you guys can check that. Let me share that object URL in the chat box. You guys can click and you can verify that the object is not accessible. Now, I got a requirement that this object to be public object, because it, let us say that is a course content. I am running an online or some training institute. I want to allow every user to download that object. That doesn't mean I can create a username and password for a general information to be accessed, right? So what I can do, I need to convert that object into public object. So now convert the object. What is the object name? Image.jpg into public object. Into public object. How we can convert? There are different ways to make any object into public object, but the first thing is we can use ACLs to convert any object into public object. We can use ACLs to convert any object into public object. But unfortunately, on our S3 bucket, ACLs are in disable mode, right? Means you cannot use ACLs to make that object public. For that reason, what we have to do is first step, enable ACLs on the S3 bucket. So by using the ACL feature, we can make that object as a public object. But we have another option, block all public access is enabled. Means even though you're administrator, you're trying to convert any object into public object, this particular feature will restrict you, or it will deny your action to convert the object into public object. So what we should do, we need to disable block all public access option on the S3 bucket. Then once everything is ready, make the object as a public using ACL. This is what we have to do. Means simple thing, we need to convert the object into public object. For that, ACLs are required. But on our S3 bucket, ACLs are in disabled state. So you can't do that. So I will enable it. So ACL feature is available. I can use ACLs to make that object public. But unfortunately, this feature will restrict you to make any object into public object. For that reason, this option I will disable. Once these two are active, we can make that object as a public. So what I do is, first I will try to make the I will try this directly without enabling and disabling these two features, which will not allow us. Okay, then we will do one by one and we'll verify at every point, every stage, and we will confirm that these two are mandatory to make the object as a public object. I guess by now you guys have accessed the object URL and you might receive access denied error. Once everything is ready, we can see that this image is accessible from anywhere across the globe by anyone. Okay, first what I do, I will go to the bucket and I want to convert this object into public object. So I will select the object, go to actions, and here there is an option called make public using ACL, but which is grayed out, which is not available to click. Why? ACLs are disabled on this S3 bucket. First, we need to enable the ACLs. How to do that? In the S3 bucket, click on permissions tab. If you scroll down, you can see something called object ownership. Object ownership. And here, you can see ACLs are disabled. So what we have to do is click on edit against the object ownership just to make ACL enable. Click on edit. You can see there are multiple edit options, right? You have to click edit, which is against object ownership. Click on edit. What is the ACL status of ACLs? ACLs are disabled. Now you need to click on ACLs enabled and here select the checkbox. Means you are acknowledging that what you are doing. So I acknowledge that ACLs will be restored. Means ACLs feature will be restored and it will be enabled. Now click on save changes. What happened now? ACL is enabled, right? Now let me click on objects tab again, select the object actions. Now you can see this option, right? Make public using ACL. Click on that make public using ACL. What happened? Click on make public. You should get an error now. See here, failed to edit public access. And if I scroll down, there is an error. If I click here, access denied. You might say, okay, you are a root user, means you are the owner, but why you are getting access denied? That's because of the option called block all public access. We enabled that. So without disabling that feature, you can't convert any object into public object. This is the one. We must disable this block all public access feature. How to disable? Same way. Click on your S3 bucket. Click on permissions tab. See here, block all public access is on, right? Now click on edit. Against block public access, click on edit. Uncheck this option, means we are not blocking all public access. Click on save changes, type confirm. Can you guys guess what we have done? Have we made the object public yet? No, we haven't made any object into public object yet. We haven't made any object into public object yet. Then what we have done? We created a way that you can make an object public if required. If you want, you can test. Let me show you. Object URL, right? Still the object is private object only, because we haven't made that object as a public. But what we have done, we disabled block all public access. That doesn't mean the bucket is public. That doesn't mean bucket is public. What does that mean? You can make any object in that bucket as a public object as per your requirement. Now select the object which you would like to make it as a public. Click on actions, make public using ACL. So now click on make public and done. Now that object is a public object. From now onwards, anyone can use that object URL to access the object. See here, it is image. Image can be loaded in the browsers. See here, even you guys can, you might have a question. Okay, you logged in that browser. So with the root user credentials, you might have access to the object. So I will use a different browser in which I did not logged in with my AWS credentials. See here, I can. Even you guys can check. Just copy the object URL which I uploaded into the chat box, right? And just click on that and you guys can see that object. Can you guys click on that URL and confirm that you are able to load the image? If you are able to load the image, means the object is a public object. Okay, I got a question like, is the bucket region specific? Yes, bucket is a region specific. Let me show you. So if I open the bucket, Amazon S3, you can see I'm in the buckets. You can see there is one bucket which is in the US East 1. Means whatever the data I upload to this bucket will be stored in the US East 1 region. Physically, that is located in that particular region. And here's something called this bucket. It is in the Hyderabad. But the advantage in the S3 is you can see the list of all buckets across all the regions. That doesn't mean it is not a region specific. That is a region specific. Whenever you are storing some data, whenever you are storing the data, definitely that is going to be the region specific, or else there are like n number of data compliancy rules. You must follow the data compliance. Like there are something like what we call that. There are some regulations that you are not supposed to store your data outside of Hyderabad. If the bucket is not region specific, your data can be stored anywhere, right? Like it can be in the Singapore, it can be in the US. Means you are not following. but you are not following the policy. That's why wherever the service is related to the storing the data, definitely that is going to be the region specific. But the name of the bucket must be unique across the globe. If I already used a bucket name, right? Something called the cloud layer. Nobody else can use the same name for their S3 buckets in any region. If you want to test, let me do this. So this is the bucket which we created, right? Let me create another bucket. Let me create another bucket, but not in Northern Virginia, in a different region, in Hyderabad. What is the error? Bucket with the same name already exists, but that is in a different region. But or you guys can check. Let me share the name. If some of you guys already logged into the AWS account, just check with that. Create in your AWS account Northern Virginia region, or in a Hyderabad region, or Mumbai, or wherever. You can't create. The names must be unique globally, but the service is region specific. Your data will be stored in the selected region only. It will never ever stored in a different regions. Okay, then. So as of now, any questions on the S3 and uploading an object, verifying that it is a private, and how to convert that into public? If you have any questions on these points, just let me know. Once we clear with the doubts, then we can move on with the other options or other features, small feature, because we have 10 to 15 more minutes. We can cover some small things like how to delete the data, how to delete the bucket. Those things also we will cover, because if I start the storage classes, it will take minimum like 40 minutes or so. So that we can cover in the next session. But today we will go with some small options or small features. Any questions as of now? Because I'm going to delete the object and buckets. That's why if you have any questions, we'll cover those questions first. If lock disable, you mean like block public access disabled? Okay. To make it clear, let me give you another thing. Okay, let me upload one more object. You will get some clarity. Just wait. So in this S3 bucket, we disable block all public access, right? On this bucket, we already disabled block all public access, and this is public object. By default, that is not a public object. I made it as a public object. Now let me upload one more object. Add files, image, let us say image 5. Let me upload. Now I will share the object URL of the image 5, but still the image 5 is the private object only. Let me show you. This is the image 5. This is the object URL, right? What is the error? Access denied. What does that mean? What does that mean? We have an S3 bucket. So here we have an S3 bucket, right? We have an S3 bucket. This is S3 bucket on which we enabled ACL enabled and block all public access is disabled, right? This doesn't mean objects are public. Still, the objects are private only. But what is the use of this? It will allow you to make any object as a public object. Let me show you. Let me give you more clarity. So here we have two objects. One is image.jpg and the second one is image5.jpg. I exclusively made this as a public and this is a private. So because of this option, your objects will never become a public. This option will allow you to make any object as a public object. Let me give you more clarity on this. So I shared the second object URL. Still that object is a private until I made that second object as a public object. Until I made that second object as a private object, still this is going to be a private object. This is going to be the private object until I made that as a public. This feature will never ever make your objects public by default. It will allow you, this feature allow you to make any object as a public as per your requirement. Because I disabled this, that doesn't mean your bucket will become a public bucket. That's not correct. Still your bucket is private, objects are private until you select each and every object manually and convert them into public. Is that clear or still any confusion? Yes, each and every object is a specific, but we have a few other options going forward. You might have a different requirement, right? The entire bucket to be public. You have a different use case that the bucket to be public bucket. So that by default, all objects should become a public objects. For that, we have a feature called, we can use bucket policy. We can apply a bucket policy on the S3 bucket. Automatically, all your objects will become a public. We are not yet to that particular point. We are not yet to that particular point. Just we are still at the beginning stage where we are making each and every object as a public using ACLs. ACL stands for Access Control List, where you can define what object to be public, what object to be private, and everything. Bucket policy, you will apply a policy on the bucket in which I can say read all kind of permission, so that all objects will become public by default. That we will see going forward, not in the first session. While going forward, like we need to cover a few other things. S3 bucket also supports static website hosting, that we will cover. Storage classes we need to cover, versioning, encryption, lifecycle rules, cross-region lifecycle rules, replication rules, and then we will see the bucket policies. These all are important in the real time. Whatever the features I mentioned, these all are mandatory features you must learn, and these features are widely used. Except static website hosting, all other like encryption, lifecycle rules, replication rules, versioning, bucket policies, these are most popular and most commonly used features on the S3. That's why I said S3's topic itself will take minimum 1 week of time. Okay, right. Any other questions? Anybody else having any questions?